This is a Townrootz podcast, episode number 65.
Welcome to the Townrootz podcast, the podcast of, about, and for Oakland. No matter if you live in the town, do business here, or are visiting, we have something for you. And now, your hosts, Anthony Wilson and Vincent Hayes.
Today we're speaking with Carol Burton from Jeweled Legacy. Hi, Carol. How are you?
I am well. Thank you, Anthony.
So good you're here. Vincent, how are you doing?
I'm good. Good. Carol, nice to meet you as well.
Nice to meet you, Vincent.
Okay. So Carol's business is Jeweled Legacy. And Carol, why don't I just turn over to you and you tell the listeners about your business?
Sure. It is Jeweled Legacy Group. The company is named after my mother. My mother's name was Jewel. And she was involved in several civic and social programs. And so when I started my company, I thought no better name than to name it after my mom. And she was the only child and it was adopted. And her parents thought of her as a jewel. And so I thought, okay, Jeweled Legacy, got the name. I started my company in late 2014 after serving as a nonprofit leader and in nonprofit leadership roles. I really was looking for a place to stand where I could have a greater impact. I learned a lot from my role in nonprofit management and also working with people who were coming out of prisons and jails and folks who were homeless. And I really felt like we needed to spend more time working with the systems that may have not served them well or served them at all. And so I created my company to work with those nonprofits and those public systems to provide support, technical assistance, resources, ways to dialogue and partner in much more efficient ways so that at the end of the day, our communities would look a little different, that our communities would have what they needed to do for themselves, and they were not reliant on governmental agencies. And so that requires community-based organizations and grassroots organizations and faith-based organizations, advocacy organizations, and it requires the government, which is our cities and counties, to work better together so that our folks are doing better and they have the resources that they need. So that's Jeweled Legacy Group. We spend a lot of time working with nonprofit organizations. We also have an executive coaching program. We provide strategic advisement. We design and host meetings and events all around the content of all around the intersection, should I say, of homelessness, public safety, mental illness, substance use, and also incarceration, and any of the other issues that really face and impact African American and Brown communities in ways that interfere with our livelihood and our health. So that's the company.
That's fantastic. I mean, you were doing great work, and you hit on a number of things that I think that we struggle with as a society. Mental health, incarceration, homelessness, I think are sort of all at the forefront right now. And so you work with nonprofit groups that work in these areas, like you coach them, people that are sort of raising their own funds and aren't necessarily getting government funds. Is that right?
So nonprofits, nonprofit per se is a legal entity. It's a legal status. Some of the organizations we work with do not have the legal status of nonprofits. Some of them have fiscal sponsors. Some of them are on their road to establishing their own nonprofit. Others are really seasoned and really anchor organizations in our communities. So they were at different developmental stages. Some of them come to us, and what they have prioritized as their needs is really to raise funds, right? I want to raise funds so I can I can deliver on the mission and the vision of our organization. Some come to us and say, listen, we really want to create programs that serve youth. And can you help us identify evidence-based programs? Can you help us identify training? Some say, really, I've been doing this for a long time and I just need a board that will help me, a functioning board and board members that will support the organization. And so we help them with board development and board growth. There are a variety of reasons why organizations would want to work with us. On the other hand, sometimes counties or cities come to us and say, listen, we're trying to work with some organizations that may be small, maybe organizations that we don't know about. Can you help us find them? And also, can you help support them so that they can get through our procurement process? We'd love to have a contract with them, but we understand our procurement process is difficult. And so we say yes, but we have to work with you around your procurement process because it is difficult. I find it difficult. So there are a range of people who may come to us for support and that we partner with for various reasons. And I want to say at the end of the day, my goal is really to put myself out of business, because when communities and leaders have what they need, they can do for themselves. Mm-hmm. They don't need you or me or government or any of the others, but when they have the resources and equal access to resources and tools, then I believe people can really do for themselves. And I'll go teach kindergarten.
I love your story on how how the county agency or government agency came to you and said, hey, work with these folks because they can't get through our procurement process. You turned it back around and said, well, maybe we need to look at your procurement process. And so, which made me think of this question. How often, or tell us if this does happen to you, that someone comes to you thinking that problem A is their problem, but once you start digging in, you find it's really like B through F are the problems.
Well, I partner with people through a discovery process. Let's just say. People self-assess. I think given the right conditions, the right environment, a supportive partnership that and tools to help people kind of look at and examine their current status, whether it's a nonprofit or a governmental agency or department, then we support them along the journey of looking at some things that would improve their efficiency and effectiveness. And so it's very common that people will come with one idea about what they want to work on and they think is a priority, and then later decide through our interactions and our support that something else is a priority. And so, no, I just want to say that it is, people generally know what they need. And we're just kind of there as facilitators to guide them along. Now, I want to say we're experts at it. And so that's why we don't come and tell people what they need to do. But it's a partnership. It's a partnership.
So I've been kind of poking around on your website, and I've seen that you've done a lot of work with entities within Oakland. What's it been like kind of doing the work that you do in Oakland?
Well, I live in Oakland. And Oakland is my home. And so the benefit is that when you work with organizations and you work with the city of Oakland, and you have the goal of that I have, that when communities and organizations and people have what they need, they can do for themselves, then you see the conditions change. You see the outcomes change. And so it's not uncommon for me to walk outside of my place and see people who are sleeping on the streets, or to see, and I want to say It's almost too heartbreaking to see so many people walking on the street, speaking to themselves, hearing voices, and or you see, um, um, uh, other an assortment of other things. When you work with nonprofits and you work with government, city agencies, to address some of those things, that's like rewarding, and you have to know that. We're not getting paid really well. So we're getting paid for the outcome. The outcome is that our communities are different. Our communities are changed. And so that's worth it. Of course, we need to make a living, but at the end of the day, we want our neighbors and our colleagues and our residents to be healthy and well and have a place to stay and be treated fairly and all those things.
Excellent. And so you did. I was actually excellent in the way that you phrased your answer. And so, but it made me think of like when you're working with, especially civic leaders here in Oakland. Are there ever times when you come to them and you need their support or you need them to have a different viewpoint in order to kind of get your job done? What kind of roadblocks do you run into? Like, how do you get them on the right page? Is it a struggle? What is that process like?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that there's a way of partnering with people that bring them along, and I don't come to the relationship, or we don't come to the relationship thinking that we have all the answers. And we also believe that every person at the table, there should be a distribution of power. And so we're not coming relinquishing power, but we're also not coming to take over. So I just wanted to say that about how we enter into relationships. We just finished last year. We finished a 5-year project where we brought all the cities together, not just the city of Oakland, but it was a countywide effort to look at places where people with mental illness and co-occurring disorders find themselves kind of caught in a system. And we looked at what we called, it was basically a map. We looked at it from a continuum of 0 to 5. And 5 being people coming out of institutions like your jails or your locked settings, and looked at and just examined that, brought all the players to the table. Then we started mapping it out and figuring out where the resources were here, what was not working in different places. And at the end of that 5-year period, there is a roadmap and an asset map. And so people have the tools to make some good decisions. And so that's how I walk in this world. I really just try to provide resources and a pathway and methodologies for people to come to the decisions themselves. Now, I also partner with advocacy organizations who can help move that along when the work has been done and it's obvious. There are some choices that have been laid out, and of course the advocacy groups can take it to the next level. So that's where we find ourselves. We're often in a facilitative role, and in a facilitative role, there's some advantages and disadvantages. That means you can meet with everybody. You can have relationships with everyone. The disadvantages is that you really have to let the process work. You can't get frustrated and want to get in there and kind of tear down relationships. And so that's where we find ourselves. I think it's a sweet spot. I think it's a wonderful place to be. We provide strategic advisement to people, folks who are leaders who are trying to think through some strategies and solutions. So we find ourselves being a confidant and a group that's in the middle.
That's amazing. So from everything that you said thus far, like it seems like you're kind of touching on just about every facet of like the inner workings of communities. And so when you think about your work and what it has the potential to do in not just homes, but communities and cities, and even in government, like what keeps you motivated to be able to do this work long term? Because I'm sure it's not just one off where you go, you walk in for a couple of weeks, you have a couple of conversations, and then that work's done. Like you're looking at probably 5 to 10 year initiatives that you're working on, and how do you keep yourself motivated to keep those things moving?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I am a leader who believes in self-care. And so I take care of myself first. I don't want to lose any wind or energy or strength in the final leg of anything. And so I am always pouring into myself and working to keep balance in my life. So that's one thing. I think the second thing is that we've can't come a long ways as a people, as a community. But there is so much more we have to do. It is not done. The disparities are there. They still exist in some way. In some areas, they're still growing. And so from my perspective, how I keep going is that I'm measuring it. And I want to tell you, during COVID, I did not get on the scale. I did not measure myself. And I didn't know where I was. I mean, all of a sudden you find out you're on the other side of something. You thought you were, you thought you were, in your stretch pants walking around. You need to measure, monitor, and report and make transparent. And so that's how I keep going. We can celebrate the successes that we've accomplished as a people, as a community, and we need to also monitor what those successes brought us. Did it get us where we thought we'd be at year 2? What more do we need to do? And so we're always monitoring, measuring, kind of weighing how well we're doing, being realistic. And I like to stay in the middle because I'm not a glass half empty person. I'm really glass half full. But to know that, you have to be looking at it and measuring it and making that transparent to everybody. So that's how I keep myself going, because it can be frustrating, particularly when you see people like me and unhoused, suffering with illnesses, preventable illnesses, lack of employment, inadequate or poor schools, not getting the kind of high quality care that they need, or culturally relevant care. We've done good. We've done some good work. We got a long ways to go. And so let's celebrate and keep moving.
And you mentioned schools. Do you do any work around education?
Actually, no. We so far we have not touched the education system. Some of the work that I've done with working with children and families who have parents in prison has been to help nationally, has been help to train teachers on how to be responsive, how to look for signs of trauma, and how to interpret some of those behaviors that they see in young people as not negative or antisocial, but as symptomatic of some other things. And so helping teachers to be more responsive to the needs of children and young people who have parents that are in prison and jails, and who may be suffering from loss and or trauma, or a myriad of things that could be going on in their lives. So to answer your question, locally, not. Only through the work that we've done through the Bay Area Children of Incarcerated Parents Partnership. And And we'd like to do more. We like to do more with our educational partners, because when you look at adults in our community, often the education system failed them. We have people coming out of schools or dropping out of schools, not making it through seventh grade, not completing middle school and junior high and middle school and high school, and then maybe coming out with deficiencies, not being able to read. That's not acceptable for our people. This is not an interrogation of any particular school district. It is across the country, particularly where you find people that look like you and I. So we need to do better.
So, hold on a second. I wasn't ready for that. Carol, one thing that I thought of as you were talking was, there sounds like, you're involved in so many things, right? Mm-hmm. But there has to be a success story that just really warms your heart. Would you mind sharing that with us? Like some project that went really well, or you had some really great outcome, and you said to yourself, that went really well, or I wasn't expecting that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, just think of one in particular where we were working with a small group of organizations who are working with in terms of providing food and shelter, emergency needs, and also housing. And those organizations were really poorly organized. And I say poorly organized, it was poorly organized because they didn't have resources. And some of them did not have salaries. They weren't paying themselves. They were doing this work from the goodness of their heart. And at the end of our work with them, and this has been through the pandemic, they're getting paychecks. They're not writing their own checks to write to deliver the food. So they have payroll in place. They have money to provide and relationships and connections to deliver on those food and meals, and also pay staff. That's worth it for us, because I don't want anyone out there doing this work without being able to take care of themselves first. Mm-hmm. It's a value of mine. I take care of me first. Mm-hmm. I want everybody else to start with that, because you can't really give to anyone else unless you've taken care of yourself. And that means I want us to have a long life. And, it's not just that they were able to establish payroll and salaries for themselves and salaries for their staff, and then improve the quality of services that they provided to the men and women that they were providing food and clothing and shelter to. But ultimately, when people are fed into and given to, they're healthier and they live longer. And, the opposite side of it is to live shorter, sicker lives versus longer, healthier lives. And that's what I want for our community. That's what I want for myself.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And so you mentioned the pandemic a couple of times, and I think many of us can share in your experience in not getting on scales over the pandemic. I know I didn't either. So I'm with you on that. But why don't you share with us how the pandemic impacted your business?
Yeah, it was scary there for a minute, because we didn't know. I mean, all of our work is so relational, and out there in the streets, with going to meetings, facilitating meetings, meeting with groups of organizations, and all of a sudden it was you were cut off. And so how can we do this? And I was tech savvy, but not nearly as tech savvy as I needed to be. And so all of a sudden we had to move all of our skills, transfer all of our skills to be, to use them in this virtual world, and to take the thing that we do best, which is relationships and communicating, and do it through this vehicle here, through Zoom and Teams and all the other WebEx, all the other platforms. And it was really a test to how well I was trained as a clinician. I have a master's in social work, and it was really a test to how well I could transfer that through a video, and then how could I teach the rest of my team to do that. And so, within 2 or 3 months, we had all of our teams back online, but virtually. And so that 5-year project that I told you about, we finished that, and we finished it strong, virtually. And so that's an example of how we had to pivot. But it also reminds me that we have so many transferable skills, and that, just taking a minute to reset and kind of trusting the process is always important.
You, as we think about your work and then having to kind of go through the pandemic, what were maybe 1 or 2 outcomes that came out of the pandemic that you felt like, oh, maybe we're better off now that we've had to do it this way? And then as a second part to this question, what are some things, what's a thing that you've noticed that as a result of the pandemic has become worse that you want to try and tackle through work with partners in the community to try and improve kind of what our community members are experiencing and how they can never have to have maybe some pain or ill that comes as a result of a global pandemic, if you will?
Well, I'm assuming you're talking a population base and not so much the organization.
Correct.
We did discover that we could house people. We could house people during the pandemic. There was a big push, urgency around getting people housed, getting them off the streets, safe places. And, we did it. We did it. We found shelter for people during particularly the early stages of the pandemic. There was new ways of thinking about how we went about it. And so that's one thing that I think we, once you have that muscle of push through, we can do it. This is urgent. We got to do it. You have everybody on board. I think the beauty of that piece was that you had the federal government in alignment, you had the state, and you had local governments. And so everybody was kind of working towards, let's get people safe and off the streets. I think that was a success, and it demonstrated a model. I want to see us use that urgency around some other things. And it is true that you had a pandemic, you had social unrest, you had lots of things at play. It was like the universe had shifted. I think we can recreate that energy and create those similar kinds of mix and formula to solve some of the other kind of really difficult problems, which is the affordability. I mean, the cost of living, the affordability of health housing here in the Bay Area. I think we can use that to look at the health gap, the equity gap in health. I mean, the chronic diseases, violence, people being killed by gun violence. Just looking at, I mentioned chronic disease, but I need to go cardiovascular disease, cancers, diabetes, you just list them. And then, I think the economic gap and also the academic gaps. Let's use some of that, what we learned through the pandemic, to address some of those things that I think are not moving. Are they worse off? I just think they're not. I think the disparity isn't closing fast enough. And 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 if not now, when?
Mm-hmm. No, great answer. Thank you so much for sharing that, Carol. Hey, one thing I wanted to ask is that you mentioned this earlier, and I wanted to go back to it. Part of you is executive coaching. What does that look like?
Well, there are all kind of coaches. There are life coaches, there are career coaches, uh, so when I think of executive coaches, I think of people who are in our C-suite folks, or folks who are interested in moving into the executive level of leadership. So they are looking to manage and develop and move a team of folks who are high functioning, or they want the team to be high functioning. And so executive coaching is, it is not, first of all, it's not therapy. And it is, if you think about it in a sense that leaders are often thinking about their staff. They're often thinking about the organization. They think about other people's needs. And executive coaching is, okay, what do I need to get to the next level? What do I need to be able to do this really big thing that's in front of me? Maybe it is I need to raise $250,000, and our organization has never raised that much money, unrestricted money, meaning that there's no ties to it, no programmatic. Maybe it is that we have been in the same building for the last 20 years, and there's no way we're going to stay here. So how do I figure that out? But maybe the big thing that they're faced with is, much like what we've been talking about, is that our clients in our program are, the death rate is high once they leave our program, or maybe the relapse rate is high. So how do I take a paradigm or a thing that's always been the case and help people think about it in a different way? How can I move? Maybe it's your organization. How can you move a whole industry, or a group of people who are in a particular sector to think differently about solving some problems, and solving some of the most difficult and tough problems? Mm-hmm. Those are the folks that we're working with in executive coaching. These are the folks who have, the stakes are high. The stakes are high. The stakes are high, too high for them, for our communities. The loss is too great. The risk is too great. And the stakes are too high for them not to take a step back and invest in themselves. And when I say invest in themselves, is, really exploring how to expand their thinking, how to expand their skills, how to expand their networks, how to move from one place of certainty and power to another place of certainty and power, so that that when they walk in the room, or when there are challenges, people are coming to them as the thought leader, as the leader, because they know that this person has not only taken care of the organization, but they see that they're taking care of themselves. And I would just end in this last thing, that I think executive coaching is a wonderful tool for when you're really trying to do something that's difficult. When you think about people who are ready to run a 26, marathon? That's 26 miles, right? Mm-hmm. Marathon. They usually have coaches. You don't get to 26 miles really most of the time on your own, not unless you're already doing 26 miles. And so that's when you need a coach, when you're about to do that marathon and you're about to engage in something. And I think this thing called life and human capital and Black health and well-being is significant. And so we want our leaders to be ready, equipped. We want them to take care of themselves, both emotionally and physically, and all of that, and be ready to get on the front lines.
Hey, Carol, this has been fantastic. How can the listeners find you?
You can find me at www.jewed, Jewed, legacy.com. You can also reach me at info@jewedlegacy.com. And yeah, check out our website. We're also on social media. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We just released a new winter newsletter. There's an article about Crossroads, really about this conversation we're having today, about Crossroads. So what are leaders doing in this moment and this critical moment? So yeah, and thank you for having me. This has been fun.
Thank you for listening to the Townrootz podcast. For more information about the show, to leave comments and connect with the hosts, head over to www.townrootz.com.